Hi, welcome to Board with Life News for September 21st. Today I'm going to talk about Mechs vs. Minions, La Granja No Siesta, Hop, an expansion for the Arkham Horror card game, and the Kickstarter for Inheritance. Let's get to it. Hey, I'm Chris. Welcome to Board with Life News. Up first, Riot Games, the maker of the incredibly popular video game League of Legends, had a bomb that they dropped on Monday in a very well-coordinated press release. And they are going to be making their second game, which surprisingly won't be a video game. It will be a tabletop game called Mechs vs. Minions. This is a 2 to 4 player co-op action programming game that sort of looks like Robo Rally, but it's cooperative, and it has a story-driven campaign. The game is massively huge. It has over 100 miniatures. It has complete painted, large miniatures of League of Legends characters that you can play with. The box is gigantic. One of the big surprising things about it is it's only going to be $75, which for a game that is that physically large and with that many miniatures is an incredibly low price point when you compare it to some of the other games and what they cost. It was really funny. So they did a really good job because, Riot Games knows how to release stuff and they have a big marketing team, and it's very different than most of the things in the board gaming world because they are so massively huge. They had an embargo, so all at once on Monday through all these different venues, all this news came out and all these videos were posted and all that kind of stuff. And as I was reading on video game pages about it, people were saying like, oh yeah, board game in 2016, that's hilarious. Or like $75 for a board game, that's ridiculous. Which was really funny because they're so unaware of the board game hobby. But then on the flip side, I see people on the board game channels like Dice Tower and Rada Runs Through and stuff like that commenting about like, what the hell, I've never heard of League of Legends. That game's not popular because I know about video games. And if you did say that, you don't know anything about video games because it is I think, by metrics of how many people are currently playing it at any given time, it is the biggest video game in the world. It is, makes billions of dollars. It is massively, massively, massively huge game. So it's fine if you don't know about it. I'm not saying you're dumb if you don't, but don't act like you know a lot about a thing that you don't know anything about, apparently. It is going to be direct distribution, so you're only going to be able to buy it if you buy it from Riot Games' website or whatever. It's not going to be available through any other game stores or online retailers or things like that. And the reason for that is that they can cut out distribution and therefore they can get the price way down from what it would normally be if you're going through traditional distribution channels. So, their reach is so massively huge because of League of Legends. I'm sure that this game will sell out incredibly fast. I'm sure a lot of board game people will be very into it because of just kind of the scale of it and the miniatures and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure a lot of video game people will be into it just because it's League of Legends. So, it's really interesting to see that people from outside the board game industry are making a big push to enter the board game industry. Stronghold Games announced La Granja No Siesta. This is going to be a standalone dice game based off of their hit game from last year's Essen, 2 years ago, something like that, recently, La Granja. This takes the dice mechanic from La Granja and it streamlines it into a dice drafting game. It's only going to take about 30 to 45 minutes. I'm really excited about this. I liked La Granja quite a bit, and I am a big fan of Dice Euros, as you know if you watch this channel. And I've been a big fan of kind of re-implementation of games into their dice versions, like Roll for the Galaxy or like Discoveries, things like that. So this is going to be a definite buy for me. Funforge and Passport announced Hop. This is a family game that has really nice artwork, and in it you are players and you're trying to gain points by helping other players, but it's still a competitive game, which is really interesting, where you're all trying to get up 7 levels of a thing, but you can help other people up, and that gets you more points, but at the end, whoever gets the 7th level first wins. So that's kind of an interesting idea. It comes with pre-painted miniatures. The art is gorgeous. It's by Marie Cardau. I don't know how to say that name. Whatever. She did the art for Dixit. Obviously, a very popular artist there. Fantasy Flight Games announced the first expansion to Arkham Horror the card game, which is kind of funny because Arkham Horror the card game hasn't come out yet, so they're already announcing and setting street dates for expansions. But Fantasy Flight is obviously very good at kind of building fan bases around their like LCG models and stuff like that. So obviously this is part of that. It's going to be called the Dunwich Legacy. It's going to come with 156 new cards, including 5 new investigators, new pool of terrors, 5 new mini cards. It's going to unlock new ways to build your deck, focusing on different strategies and playstyles. And it's also going to come with 2 scenarios, Clover Club and Miskatonic University. So I'm sure a bunch of people that still are buying Lovecraft games and Cthulhu games will be very interested in this. This week's Kickstarter is for Inheritance, which is a tabletop role-playing game by Luke Crane, who famously designed Burning Wheel, one of the most popular kind of indie systems to play within. He also did the Mouse Guard role-playing game, things like that. He's a very popular board game or role-playing game author. This game's very interesting. It is for exactly 9 players and 1 facilitator. No more, no less. You have to have that exact number of people. It's played in 2 rooms simultaneously. So he's definitely trying some interesting new weird things with this game. So I'm very interested to see kind of how that all plays out. It's more intriguing than anything else to me. It has some really beautiful artwork. It's not cheap though. It costs $65 right now on Kickstarter. So if that interests you, go back that. That is the news for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to this video. Make sure you go follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Chris Bryan Games. I would very much appreciate that. And while you're at it, go listen to our Dungeons & Dragons podcast. It's linked below because it's really good and I think you'd enjoy it. This week's question comes from @Chromus, whatever, via Twitter. And they say or ask, thoughts on Mechs vs. Minions going straight to consumer to drop costs? Question mark. So, as I stated earlier in the news, Mechs vs. Minion is going direct without distribution. That model has obviously worked incredibly well for a lot of manufacturers, things like that. Cards Against Humanity, that's their model, and obviously they did incredibly well with that. So a game like Mechs vs. Minions would cost twice what it costs right now if it was going through traditional distribution channels, because generally you're selling your game to distributors for about half the MSRP so that they can then sell it on to other companies that then could discount it or whatever they want to do. So obviously they can make money off of it so they can keep their lights on and pay their employees. So generally there's kind of the rule for pricing games or whatever that comes from like the publication side of things, where you generally want your MSRP to be about 5 times the production cost of a game, which doesn't mean that you're getting, you're ripping somebody off by charging them way more. It's just that way you can still make money when you have to cover shipping and selling it for 50% for your distribution, things like that. So by Mechs vs. Minions not doing that, they can charge way less and they can have their production costs be 2 or maybe 3 times their MSRP be 2 or maybe 3 times their production costs instead of 4 or 5 times. It's not a really viable solution for a lot of board game companies because if you plan to make a lot of money off of it, you need to have a large reach by yourself. You need to have infrastructure on your website for a store, all that stuff. Tim Fowers does this. He does direct distribution. He did Paperback and Burgle Bros. And that he sells way less copies than he would, but he gets a much larger percent of the sales, so he doesn't need to sell as many copies. So there are definitely people in the board game world that are trying to do this outside of Riot Games, but nobody's doing it on the scale of Riot Games. And they said that they produced 30,000 copies of this game to start with, which for any other game is a huge initial print run that most game manufacturers outside of the big dogs, like obviously Hasbro, which is kind of a different thing, but like Asmodee, things like that, can't manage print runs that large for most of their games, especially a new company that has never produced a board game, would never do, 30,000 units. 5,000 is generally a pretty good print run for a board game. So it sets up, it's a double-edged sword. One, it's great because as a consumer, I get that game for way less money, and I get a game that they can absolutely do crazy deluxe stuff with, and it doesn't cost me, an insane amount of money. So that's great. On the flip side is a company like Riot that can afford to take that risk, where if they didn't sell any of these copies, they're fine. They make so much money off of League of Legends, it doesn't really matter. So it's not a huge risk for that company. Is that setting an expectation that is unattainable by other people within the board game industry? So like if this game brings people into the tabletop hobby, which I very much think it will bring a lot of video game fans over, the ones that were saying $75 is outrageous for a board game, does that set up an expectation that then when they go buy a game like Agricola or something that costs about that same price, maybe a little bit less, but in that same price, and I think that's a, well-produced game with nice bits and stuff, but they're not getting a gigantic box with custom plastic miniatures and all this stuff. They're getting some cardboard, some cards, and some wood. Are they going to be disappointed? So I don't think it's a model that most companies are going to be able to follow, so I don't think it's that big a deal. But it's definitely a bold choice for them to make and an interesting choice, and I think it'll pay off very well for Riot Games in the long run, because I don't think they're going to have any problem selling out of a 30,000 print run of a game that has fans so rabid about it before it's even come out. So yeah, great question. Thanks for asking, and I will see you next week.